Dust curled in spirals as the hooves of the dying horse staggered across the main road into town. The creature's ribs jutted like the bones of a sunken ship, and its legs trembled with each step, yet it pressed forward, guided by the man slumped low in the saddle. His hat cast a long shadow over his face, but the townfolk didn't need to see his eyes to know he was a stranger. The way he sat, firm but exhausted, carried a heaviness that warned people to keep their distance. And they did. The townsfolk paused their conversations and halted their errands. A woman standing outside the grocer's pressed a hand to her chest. Children peeked from behind their fathers' coats. Even the stray dogs hushed, as if they too sensed that something sacred or tragic had entered the town. The sheriff stood on the wooden steps of his office, one boot resting on the lowest step, a toothpick working the corner of his mouth. Sheriff Ray Hawkins had seen every kind of trouble blow through Dustwood, from drunk ranchers to bloodied cattlemen, but never a sight like this. He descended the steps slowly, his gaze locked on the gaunt animal and the stranger atop it. The man pulled gently on the reins, and the horse obeyed with a grunt of pain. They stopped in front of the sheriff, and only then did the man raise his face. He couldn't have been more than 40, though the lines cut deep around his eyes and mouth. His beard was overgrown, not in the way of laziness, but survival. His clothes were worn, patched at the elbows, stained at the knees, but clean. His eyes, a tired shade of blue, held the look of someone who had seen too much and said too little. "She's dying," the man said, his voice gravel and wind. "Need a place to rest her." Sheriff Hawkins glanced at the horse. One leg was swollen grotesquely. Its coat was dull, crusted with salt and blood, and its breathing was ragged. Whatever journey they'd taken, it had nearly killed them both. "There's a stable 2 blocks down. Joe runs it," the sheriff said after a moment, "but he don't take in strays." The man nodded. "She ain't a stray. She's my whole damn life." The sheriff looked again, not at the horse this time, but at the man. There was something in those words, something too honest to dismiss. "What's your name?" "Call me Colt." Sheriff Hawkins gave a faint nod, still wary but not unkind. "You gonna be trouble, Colt?" "No, sir. Just need a place for her. After that we'll be gone." Something in the man's tone, final, like the closing of a book, unnerved the sheriff. He stepped aside and motioned down the street. "Joe's stable. Tell him I sent you." Colt nodded once, touched the brim of his hat, and nudged the horse forward. The sheriff watched them go, noting the way Colt kept talking softly to the mare, as if coaxing her soul to stay a little longer. It was the way a man might talk to his dying mother, or a child fading in bed. Not pity, but reverence. Joe nearly slammed the stable door when he saw them coming. "What the hell?" he muttered, stepping back. "That horse looks like death chewed her up and spit her out." "She's got a name," Colt said quietly. "It's Mercy." Joe blinked. "Well, Mercy don't got long, friend. You sure she can even make it inside?" "She'll try," Colt said, hopping down and nearly buckling from exhaustion. He caught himself on the saddle horn, then turned to support the mare. Mercy leaned into him, 1,000 pounds of failing flesh trusting him with her final strength. They moved together, like one broken body, toward the stall Joe begrudgingly pointed to. "She's been with me since I was 17, Colt murmured once they were inside. He removed the saddle with practiced care, his fingers trembling. "She's seen me through war and fire, saved my life twice, got me home when I forgot where home was." Joe, caught off guard by the gentleness in Colt's voice, softened. "She needs a vet. Now, I ain't got much," Colt admitted, laying the saddle down, "but I'll pay what I can." Joe sighed and walked out to fetch Doc Lively, the only vet for miles. Colt stayed beside Mercy, brushing her mane with his fingers, whispering things no one else could hear. When Doc Lively arrived, he didn't say much. He examined Mercy with the quiet, firm precision of a man who'd worked with dying animals longer than he cared to count. After a few minutes, he pulled Colt aside. "She's in bad shape," the vet said. "Legs infected. Fever sky high. She's running on heart alone." Colt didn't blink. "Can you save her?" "I can try, but she's gotta want it too." "She does." Then I'll stay the night." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, the stable grew quiet. Colt sat against the stall wall, watching Mercy breathe. Her eyes were half closed, but they flicked open every time he moved. In town, whispers spread like wildfire. Who was the stranger with the dying horse? Why had he come here of all places? Some said he was a deserter. Others claimed he was a bounty hunter, hiding from a past that finally caught up. But no one could deny the way he looked at that horse, like she was his last remaining piece of grace. Back in the stable, Colt drew out a small tin box from his satchel. Inside were faded letters, a ribbon, and a photo. Just him and Mercy, standing on a ridge somewhere west of Amarillo. The wind had caught her mane, and his smile in that picture was a younger man's, one who still believed in tomorrows. He set the photo beside her and whispered, "I'm sorry I couldn't do better. You gave me everything. All I ever did was survive." Outside, the sheriff returned. He leaned against the stable door, watching through the slats as Colt curled his fingers around the mare's forelock. "What's his story?" Joe asked quietly, joining him. The sheriff chewed his toothpick. "Don't know yet, but it's a hell of a thing, riding into town with a dying horse. Man like that's either running from something or toward it." And as the stars prickled the black canvas of night, Mercy let out a long breath, and Colt held her tighter. Not to stop her from going, but to remind her, just once more, she was never alone. It would be the first time in years the sheriff would blink away tears. But tomorrow's reckoning had only just begun. Morning crept into Dustwood slow and golden, spilling through the stable slats in streaks that painted Mercy's coat with light. She hadn't moved much during the night. Her breathing was quieter now, steady, but thin, like a whisper stretched across silence. Colt had dozed off with his head resting on her flank, his arm draped protectively over her ribs. It wasn't comfort he sought, it was proximity. If the end came, he wanted to be there. For once in his life, he didn't want to be too late. Doc Lively sat nearby on a stool, eyes heavy but alert. He cleaned the leg wound, applied poultices, and kept her fever down with compresses soaked in cool water. It had taken everything he had, and still, he didn't know which way the sun would rise for her. Colt stirred. "She make it through the worst." "Worst ain't past yet," the doctor murmured, "but she's still here." That was enough for Colt. He sat up, stretched the knots out of his shoulders, and glanced toward the stall door. A figure stood there, Sheriff Hawkins. He'd brought coffee. One for himself, one for Colt. Colt took the cup with a nod of gratitude. "Didn't expect you back." The sheriff shrugged. "Couldn't sleep. Had a feeling you couldn't either." Colt sipped. The warmth helped. "She's stronger than me. Always has been." The sheriff stepped closer, his eyes scanning the mare, then settling on Colt. "You ready to tell me why you're really here?" Colt didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at Mercy, then down at the saddlebag near the wall. Finally, he sighed. "2 towns over, there's a man named Corbin. Rancher. Powerful. Ruthless. I used to work for him." The sheriff nodded slowly, waiting. 8 months back, he caught me sneaking a family off his land. They'd missed rent, and he was going to burn him out. Wife, 2 kids. So I took him. Got him safe. He sent men after me. Didn't catch me, but they caught Mercy. Cut her leg to slow us down. She kept running anyway. Sheriff Hawkins narrowed his eyes. "That's why the wound's so deep." "I've been hiding ever since," Colt said, "tending her best I could. But when it got bad, I had to risk coming into town. And Dustwood's the last place I thought Corbin's men would think to look." The sheriff took a long breath. "You saved a family and paid the price." "She paid it," Colt said, voice tight. "I just rode." The sheriff took another sip of his coffee. "You plan to leave when she's healed?" "If she heals," Colt said, "I won't drag her back out into hiding." The sheriff nodded. "You're not what I expected." Colt managed a faint smile. "Neither's she." Later that morning, word spread through town that the stranger with the horse wasn't just some drifter. Stories, half-truths, and fragments of overheard conversation became gospel in a matter of hours. The grocer said Colt was a hero. The blacksmith claimed he'd seen Colt ride once during the border conflicts. Miss Evelyn at the schoolhouse said she remembered a boy named Colt Whitaker who used to read poetry aloud when no one was listening. No one could quite agree on who he was, but they all agreed he didn't belong to the lawless kind. By noon, visitors came in trickles. A farmer brought oats. A widow brought a blanket. No one stayed long, just enough to lay a kindness down and leave. Colt accepted it all quietly. Mercy lifted her head only once, when a little girl brought her a sugar cube and whispered something into her ear. "She's listening," Colt said softly after the girl had gone. Even now. That afternoon, the sheriff returned again, this time not alone. With him walked a woman in her early 40s, sharp-eyed but warm. She wore boots worn thin at the heels and a hat pinned up with a silver feather. "This is Clara Dunn," the sheriff said. "Runs the post office, also a friend to horses. Thought she might be of help." Clara stepped into the stall, calm and confident. She looked Mercy over with practiced eyes, then knelt by her side and placed a hand on the mare's neck. "She's fighting," she said, "and she's got a reason to." "She always does," Colt replied. Clara looked at Colt for a moment longer, studying him. "You're not just here for her, are you?" Colt didn't flinch. "She's the only reason I came. Everything else I've already left behind." Clara gave a slight nod. "Then we help her. And when she's standing again, maybe you'll let her carry you toward something better." Colt didn't answer. He looked at Mercy, then away. The day passed slowly, filled with quiet motion, buckets refilled, bandages changed, soft brushes against a matted mane. Mercy didn't worsen, and for Colt, that was a win. By evening, as the sun began to fall behind the western ridge, Doc Lively returned from a quick trip to gather supplies. He brought with him something unexpected, a telegram. The sheriff opened it first. As he read, his expression hardened. "It's from Corbin," he said. "He's offering $500 for information on your whereabouts. Says you're a thief. A deserter. Says you took what was his." Colt didn't blink. I figured he'd come looking eventually. Sheriff Hawkins folded the paper slowly. No name in it. Just a description. Man with a scar on his jaw, riding a gray mare with a limp. Clear as day. "What'll you do?" Colt asked. The sheriff stared at him for a long moment. "Nothing. He sends men. They'll find this town more trouble than it's worth. Far as I'm concerned, I never saw that telegram." Colt nodded once, solemn. "Thank you." The sheriff turned to go but paused at the door. "Colt, if you want to keep running, I won't stop you. But Mercy didn't carry you all this way just to keep running." That night, Colt sat by Mercy again, her breathing shallow but steady. The stars blinked above like distant prayers, and Dustwood lay quiet. He reached into the tin box again, pulling out the ribbon, a faded red strip once tied in Mercy's mane during parades, long before things went dark. He tied it gently in her forelock and whispered, "You made it one more day." And for the first time in weeks, her ears twitched in response. By the third morning, Mercy stood. It wasn't graceful. Her legs trembled under the weight, and she leaned into the stall wall like a drunk trying to remember how to walk. But she was up, alive and up. Colt had dozed with his back against the hay, a saddle blanket tucked beneath his head. He woke to the sound of a hoof dragging faintly across the straw and saw her staring at him, wide-eyed and glassy, her nostrils flaring. He rose slowly, careful not to startle her, and stepped close. "You stubborn miracle," he whispered. Mercy blinked, then lowered her head, touching it to his chest. For Colt, there was no world beyond that moment. No wanted posters, no rancher named Corbin, no town uncertain of who he was. Just this mare and the stretch of miles they'd weathered together. The sheriff came later, this time with Clara and a quiet urgency behind his eyes. "They came into town," he said. "Two men. Weren't subtle about who they were looking for." Colt's face hardened. "Corbin's. Most likely. Said they're just passing through, but they've asked at the general store, the smithy, and the saloon." The sheriff crossed his arms. "They're poking around, but they ain't drawn yet. If you've got a plan, now's the time." Colt glanced at Mercy, then back. "If they find her, they'll take her. Maybe worse." Clara stepped forward. "They won't find her. Not if we move her." She's only just gotten up, Colt said. She doesn't need to run, Clara answered. She just needs to disappear. By sundown, the plan was in motion. Dustwood had no shortage of allies when it came to hiding something worth protecting. The schoolhouse cleared out a small storeroom, laid with straw and lined with cedar walls to keep the cold from creeping in. Clara arranged it. The widow from the ridge brought quilts. The stable hand, barely 16, offered his family's feed quietly and without condition. Colt walked Mercy through the town under the cover of dusk, her pace slow, his hand on her bridle, heart heavy with every step. She didn't protest. Somehow she understood. As they reached the back of the schoolhouse, Colt turned to see a small gathering of Dustwood's quiet few. The sheriff, Clara, the widow, the smith, all watching with quiet solidarity. "You've given more than I deserved," Colt said. Clara touched his arm. "Sometimes the people who think they don't deserve kindness are the ones who need it most." Mercy settled into the storeroom with surprising ease. Colt stayed with her until well past midnight, brushing her coat, whispering fragments of the trail they'd taken together. She dozed standing, still swaying slightly, but her strength was returning. He could feel it, like the low thrum of hope under skin. Then, around 2 in the morning, he slipped out. He saddled the sheriff's borrowed horse, an old bay gelding with more patience than speed, and rode out alone. He didn't leave a note. Didn't need to. The direction he went told the whole story. At dawn, 2 strangers found him waiting by the dry riverbed east of town, seated on a rock, hands folded in plain sight. They approached cautiously, hands near their belts. "You Colt Whitaker?" the first one asked. Colt nodded once. "You got something that belongs to Mr. Corbin." "I have something he never earned," Colt said evenly. "She's not his." The taller of the 2 men stepped forward. "You ran from him. You stole from him." "I saved a family. They're alive. I'd do it again." There was a beat of silence. Then the shorter man drew first. Colt had been waiting. The borrowed revolver barked once, and the man spun and dropped. The taller one hesitated, his eyes wide, then reached for his holster. Colt didn't shoot. He stood instead slowly and said, "I'm not here to kill. I'm here to finish it." The man froze. "Then why are you armed?" "Because men like Corbin only listen when there's weight behind your words." A long pause stretched between them. Finally, the man lowered his hand. "This isn't worth dying over." "No, it isn't," Colt said. "So go back. Tell Corbin he lost. Tell him the mayor's gone, and so am I." The man gave him a lingering look, then turned and walked away. He didn't look back. Colt buried the other man beneath a pile of stones and marked it with a strip of bark bearing no name. He didn't celebrate. It wasn't victory. It was survival, hard and necessary, the kind of justice that didn't taste sweet. He rode back toward Dustwood with the sun behind him, unsure if the town would still open its arms when he arrived. He didn't expect a welcome, but as he neared the schoolhouse, Mercy was there, standing tall and proud in the open yard, Clara beside her, Sheriff Hawkins leaning on the rail. "You should have told us," the sheriff said. "You'd have stopped me." "Probably." They said no more about it. Colt stepped to Mercy and laid a hand on her shoulder. She snorted, then nudged his chest, as if to scold him. He laughed under his breath. "Don't give me that look," he said. "I came back, didn't I?" Clara stepped forward. "The town's been talking. Some think you should stay." "And you?" She smiled. "I think the world's full of men running from who they used to be. Dustwood could use 1 or 2 trying to become something better." Colt looked toward the horizon. "You think I could? You already have." That evening, Colt stood at the edge of the pasture behind the schoolhouse, Mercy grazing beside him. Her limp was still there, but it was softer now, manageable. She walked without pain. The sky turned to fire above the hills, and somewhere in town, a church bell rang twice. Colt felt the weight of the years behind him shift, if only a little. He didn't know what tomorrow would ask. He only knew he'd face it here, beside her, in a place that had learned his name and didn't flinch. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like a man on the run. He felt like a man finally home. Colt found the mornings in Dustwood quieter now, not just in sound but in tension. The nerves that once ran beneath his skin had softened, their sharp edges dulled by routine. He woke at dawn, brewed coffee over a fire that hissed gently, and stepped out to the pasture where Mercy waited, ears pricked, eyes calm. Her recovery had been slow, deliberate, much like his own, but each day she carried herself with more certainty, and with her healing came something neither of them expected: purpose. Children from the school began visiting the pasture during recess, drawn by the legend that had quietly grown around the mare and the man. They'd approach in cautious clusters, chattering with the awe reserved for outlaws turned protectors. Mercy tolerated them with grace, and Colt, once a man who'd forgotten how to talk without a gun in reach, found himself kneeling beside them, teaching them to approach with open palms, to read a horse's breath like a language. Clara often watched from the edge of the fence. She never interrupted, simply smiled, letting the scene unfold on its own. "You know," she said one morning as the children dispersed, "if you keep this up, we'll have to start paying you." Colt chuckled, brushing hay from his coat. "Not sure you could afford my going rate." "Is that so? I charge in peace of mind and second chances." She stepped beside him, the sun drawing copper tones through her hair. "You're not just fixing her, you know. You're fixing yourself." Colt didn't respond right away. He watched Mercy nudge a stick with her muzzle, pushing it toward a boy too shy to take it. The boy smiled anyway. "I'm not sure I was ever whole to begin with," he said. "That's what makes healing hard. You have to build something you never had." She reached into her satchel and handed him a folded sheet of parchment. He raised a brow and opened it. A flyer, torn from a bounty post. His face was still on it, but someone had scrawled "Void confirmed deceased" in red ink across the bottom. "The sheriff sent word out," she said. "Made up a tale about you dying on the trail. Said it was all settled peacefully." Colt ran a thumb along the edge of the paper. "Guess I really am a ghost now." "Not to us," Clara said. Still, safety was a fragile thing, and ghosts didn't stay buried forever. It was late afternoon when the storm returned, not of wind or thunder, but of past inconsequence. Colt was repairing the western fence line when he noticed a rider on the ridge, a single figure, motionless, watching. By nightfall, the rider was gone, but Colt's unease remained. He went to the sheriff. "I saw someone today," he said. "Didn't come to town. Just watched." The sheriff nodded. "I heard a horse outside the inn. No one claimed it. Saddle was too polished to be local." "You think it's Corbin?" "I think the world's full of men who believe silence means permission. Corbin may have written you off, but he wouldn't forget the mare." Colt exhaled slowly. "Then we can't wait for him to knock." "What are you planning?" "Nothing foolish," Colt replied. "But I've learned something about Mercy. She's not just a horse. She's a reason for people to do right, for a man to stay standing when everything tells him to run." The sheriff eyed him. "You gonna stay standing, Colt?" "I'll stand until there's nothing left to defend." The next day, Clara gathered the townsfolk in the schoolhouse. Not for fear, but for clarity. She explained what might come, who Corbin was, what Mercy meant. Some frowned, others nodded, and when it was quiet again, the widow from the ridge stood. "We didn't shelter her to abandon her now," she said. The smith added, "A town's only worth the things it protects." And so it was decided. No grand resistance, no violence, but vigilance. Colt rode the outskirts that night. Mercy trailed behind, her gait confident now. The stars hung low and quiet. Every rustle in the grass, every owl's cry twisted the silence into suspense. But there was no attack, no fire in the hills, just waiting. The rider returned on the third day. This time, he rode straight into Dustwood. He was young, maybe 25. Clean coat, hardened eyes. He stopped outside the sheriff's office and dismounted slowly. Colt watched from the porch of the feed store. "You Colt Whitaker?" the rider called. Colt nodded, stepping forward. "My name's Ethan Corbin," he said. "I'm his son." Colt stiffened. "I ain't here for revenge," Ethan continued. "I'm here for the truth. I want to know why a man like you took a mare my father paid handsomely for." Colt studied the young man. His voice didn't carry anger, just a cold sort of expectation. She was broken, Colt said. Starved. Crippled. Your father saw meat. I saw a chance. A chance for what? For something better. Ethan frowned. He said you stole from him. That you betrayed your post. I disobeyed, Colt admitted, because I saw a life worth saving. Ethan looked past him toward the schoolyard. Mercy stood by the fence. Children clustered near her again. She didn't flinch. Just watched. She doesn't look broken now, Ethan said. She never was, Colt replied. She was just waiting for someone to believe she mattered. A long silence passed between them. Then Ethan reached into his coat and pulled out another flyer. The same as before, but this one had no red scrawl. Just a bounty, fresh ink. He tore it in half. I'm not my father, he said, but he'll come looking again. He always does. Colt nodded. Then we'll be ready. Ethan mounted again and turned his horse without another word. He didn't look back. Colt stood still for a long while, then slowly walked to Mercy. She's safe, Clara asked, having come to stand beside him. For now. You believe he meant it? I believe he wants something different, Colt said. But wanting and doing ain't always the same. He rested his hand on Mercy's shoulder. Her coat was warm from the sun. She's not just a horse anymore, Clara murmured. No, Colt said. She's the line between the man I was and the man I might be. And as the sun dipped below the trees, casting the town in golden hush, Colt finally felt it, what Clara had said weeks ago. Not just healing, building. And this time, it had roots.